England is an island. And an island, when no ships arrive from outside, is nothing but a prison. When the Channel Tunnel closes and the ports fall silent, how long can 67 million people in the United Kingdom survive? The first silence at Dover Port came in, the kind no one noticed. In the misty air of a July morning, the lorries were queued up as usual, drivers sipping thermos coffee, smoking cigarettes, part of the routine. Only one thing was missing: the lorries coming the other way. Those massive TIRs that should have been coming from Calais, the refrigerated containers loaded with food, the fuel tankers. None came. As the clock approached noon, port workers began exchanging strange looks, radios crackling. Messages from the French port were incoherent. No fuel. Lorries can't move. Same situation across Europe. That's when a port official, his name doesn't matter. He died 3 days later anyway. From water he drank, from the sewers opened. Reuters on his mobile and saw global oil flow halted. Middle East conflict reaches breaking point. Britain's shelves held only 3 days of stock. Everyone knew this, but no one thought about it. Why would they? Lorries came to the supermarket every day, every morning, every evening, like clockwork, until they didn't. The ticking clock. First 18 hours, BBC, Sky News, all channels ran the same headline. The government spokesman, that always smiling, white-teethed, hair-gelled man, told the public to stay calm. We have strategic reserves. This is temporary. Was it temporary? At that Shell station in Clapham, South London, the queue started at 15. By 16, the queue was spilling onto the street. At 17, a fight broke out. A Range Rover tried to skip the queue and dive for the pumps. The driver of the Honda behind him got out, pounded on his window. The Range Rover revved its engine. The Honda driver climbed onto the bonnet, screaming, "You'll wait your turn, you!" By the time police arrived, 2 station workers were already collapsed on the ground. When the petrol ran out, the crowd was still there, staring at the empty tanks, as if staring would make them fill up again. The M25, that cursed motorway encircling London, had turned into a complete car park by evening. People were trying to get home on their last drops of petrol, but everyone had hit the road at the same time. The gridlock started at Junction 5 and spread like a virus. Lorries, cars, minibuses. Some ran out of petrol and abandoned their vehicles to walk. One man left his BMW's door open, keys in the ignition, walked away, didn't even look back. Panic on the radios, but not yet acceptance. Emergency line has crashed. Ambulances can't find fuel. Please don't call 999 unless necessary. Unnecessary. Which call was unnecessary? A heart attack, or being stranded on the road out of petrol. Night. Shelves. Hands. Collision. As evening darkness fell. And in England, the air is always dim like a fog blanket. The supermarkets turned into hell. Tesco Extra, that massive hypermarket in Stratford, would normally see 400 to 500 people on an evening. That night, there were 4,000. Security guards stood at the doors, then retreated, because there was nothing they could stop. People ransacked the shelves, but not intelligently. In panic, car boots filled with televisions, toy cars, perfumes, not food. People had forgotten what mattered yet. A woman middle-aged, probably a teacher or nurse, was running with 12 packs of toilet paper in her arms. A young man behind her caught up and snatched the packs. The woman fell to the ground. No one helped. Everyone was busy grabbing their own packs. At the tinned goods aisle, a father was shouting at his son, "Take them all of them!" The boy, maybe 8 or 9, was sweeping the shelves with his arms. Beans, corn, tuna. Then another man came, backed his trolley up to the shelf, and the aisle emptied completely. Cashiers closed their tills. "No cash. Cards aren't working," they shouted, but no one listened. Tills were forced open. money taken. But more importantly, the door to the back warehouse was broken down. That night, the same scene repeated in every neighborhood across London. Sainsbury's, Asda, Lidl, Waitrose, didn't matter. Rich neighborhood, poor neighborhood, hunger doesn't discriminate by class. Keep calm and carry on no longer applies. The British were famous for that legendary composure. Even during the Blitz, they'd queue. They'd drink tea while bombs fell. But this was different. A bomb falls once. Oil, though. When oil runs out, everything ends. Slowly, painfully. At Westminster, in the square in front of Parliament, the first tents began going up. People wanted answers from the government. What will you do? When will the oil come? How will we feed our starving children? Police set up barriers. Then those barriers were knocked down. The tents multiplied. Near midnight, the Prime Minister appeared on television, his face pale, dark circles under his eyes. We are declaring a national emergency. There is no curfew, but we ask our citizens to remain in their homes. We have mobilized our army, our police, all our resources. When the screen went dark, everyone understood. The government had no plan either. The island was now truly a prison. And the guards were outside the walls too. A cold rain began. Over London, silently, soaking, people looking from windows stared at the dark streets. In the distance, the sound of sirens. But ambulances weren't coming anymore. Only the sound remained. Echo, scream. The shelves were empty, the tanks were empty, and the island had begun to drown. Day 3, London's stomach rumbling. The morning of the third day, the city smelled different. Rubbish. Rubbish everywhere. The rubbish lorries had stopped. The diesel was gone. Veolia, Biffa, all those companies made the same announcement. We are suspending operations. Suspending, what a lovely word. As if they'd return after a while. The streets in Camden were filled with black bags. People were still putting their rubbish out because what else would they do? Hoard it in their homes. When it rained, the bags tore. Dogs whose owners could no longer feed them, tore through the rubbish. Gulls attacked. Rats emerged. The digital screens at Piccadilly Circus were still lit, but no one was looking at the adverts. Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Samsung, these all seemed like things from another age. People were looking at the mountains of rubbish beneath the screens, and the disturbing thing was this. No one was trying to clean up. Everyone was responsible for their own home, their own family now. Society, that invisible contract, was falling apart piece by piece. NHS, the collapse of those who said, "We'll save you." St. Thomas Hospital, that massive building beside Westminster Bridge, switched to generator on the 4th day. Mains electricity was still coming, but outages had started. The generator kept the operating theaters open until the 5th day. The generator ran out of fuel. Hospital management announced, emergency cases only. But every case was an emergency now. A diabetic man's insulin had run out. A woman in chemotherapy missing her final session was a death sentence. There was no Ventolin left for children having asthma attacks. The pharmacies had already been looted. First day, smart people took antibiotics and painkillers. Second day, the disgrace began. People took everything. Aspirin, vitamins, indigestion medicine. A man smashed the window at Boots and looted the perfume aisle. Perfume. No medicine left, but there was perfume. A nurse. Her name was Sarah. She'd worked for the NHS for 15 years. Walked to the hospital that morning, 8 kilometers. Half the tubes were closed. There were no buses. When she reached the hospital, there was a queue of 200 people at the door. Injured, sick, dying. When she went inside, the corridors smelled of corpses. Literally, the cooling systems weren't working. The bodies in the morgue, forget the bodies in the morgue. Even the living in the corridors couldn't breathe properly. Sarah saved 3 people that day, lost 14. At the end of the night, she took off her scrubs, leaned against a wall and cried silently. A doctor passing by looked at her, said nothing, because he was crying too. M25. Graveyard of abandoned cars. The motorway encircling London was now the world's longest scrapyard. For 188 kilometers, abandoned cars lined up. BMWs, Fords, Mercedes, all sharing the same fate. Empty tank. Some cars still had belongings inside. Suitcases, toys, photo albums. People had tried to escape. Where to? They didn't know. But away from London. On the 6th day, the looters came. In groups, on bicycles, on foot. They were stripping the cars, siphoning with hoses to see if a drop of petrol remained in the tank. Batteries ripped out. Radios, sat-navs, everything. A man from Croydon, a former plumber, opened the boot of a Ford Focus and found 2 tins of baked beans, a bottle of water, a hunting rifle and 5 cartridges. He took the rifle, the tins too. Then a voice came from behind. "Leave it." He turned. 3 young men, iron bars in their hands. The plumber raised the rifle. His hand was shaking. I just want food. I won't do anything to you." One of the lads laughed. "But we're going to do something to you." The gunshot echoed over the M25. Gulls took flight. The plumber fell to the ground. The lads approached, took the tins, the rifle too, kicked the body. One of them took off his jacket, put it on. "Nice coat," he said. They walked on, towards the next car. Electricity, pitch black. On the 7th day, the national grid collapsed. Not completely, but the power stations, those massive facilities burning natural gas, using imported fuel, stopped. 40% of Britain's electricity came from natural gas. That gas came from Norway and Russia. The pipelines were still working, but the pumps had stopped. No port workers. Technicians had gone home. The first outage started at 6 p.m. East London went dark. Literally. Street lamps went out. Buildings went dark. Only in a few places, hospitals, police stations, were generators still running. But generators wouldn't last long either. In the darkness, people looked out of their windows. The sky, they saw the sky properly for the first time. Stars. Seeing stars in London had been impossible until that moment. Light pollution had covered everything. Now, there was no light pollution, because there was no light either. In Brixton, a group of youths broke down a shop door, went in with candles. The shelves were already empty, but they thought they'd find something in the back warehouse. They didn't. In anger, they smashed the windows, overturned the counters. A fire started. A candle, electrical fault, not clear. The fire spread to the streets. The fire brigade didn't come, because the fire engines had no diesel. People came out of their homes and watched the fire. No one tried to put it out. They just watched. Light, warmth. In such a dark city, fire was almost comforting. But the fire spread. 3 buildings burned. There were people inside. Screams were heard. Then silence. Cold. England's greatest enemy. It was July. But in England, July can be cold, especially at night, 12 to 15 degrees. When there was electricity, no problem. Central heating, electric heater. Now, there was no electricity. British homes have no insulation. Victorian buildings let the cold in. It gets damp, seeps through the walls. People started looking for wood. Trees were cut down in Hyde Park with axes, saws. The park wardens tried to stop them. They were beaten. The trees continued to be cut. Regent's Park, Green Park, Hampstead Heath, all shared the same fate. London's lungs were sacrificed so people could stay warm. Some burned furniture, tables, chairs, bookcases. A woman in Chelsea, A former teacher burned her library, 300 books. Dickens, Austen, Orwell, all went into the flames. She burned them crying, but sacrificing books was more sensible than freezing to death. Martial law, order on paper. On the 8th day, the government declared martial law. The army came down into the streets, or tried to. The problem was, the army had no fuel either. Tanks couldn't move. Armored vehicles had stopped. There were only soldiers on foot, with rifles. Soldiers were deployed in Whitehall, Westminster. But in Tottenham, Hackney, Tower Hamlets, no soldiers, because there were no vehicles to get there. And the soldiers were hungry too. The rations they were given lasted 2 days. What would happen after? A group of soldiers, young lads, 20 to 22 years old, were tasked with guarding a Tesco warehouse. At night, a crowd came, 500 to 600 people. Hungry, desperate. "Don't fire," the commander shouted. "Just scare them." But how do you scare them? How do you stop them without firing bullets? The crowd advanced. The soldiers retreated. The warehouse was looted. 1 soldier was injured. 1 civilian died. No one won that night. On the 9th day, London fell silent. No cars, no buses, only people walking, and even they were slowly diminishing. The island's throat had been squeezed, and now it couldn't breathe. Days 10 to 14. When water disappears, on the 12th day, the taps ran dry. Thames Water, the company operating London's water network, didn't even make an announcement, because there was no one left who could. Water treatment plants ran on electricity. Pumps ran on electricity. When the electricity went, the system collapsed. At first, people went to the reservoirs. Some found clean water. Most didn't. Then there was the Thames, that brown, filthy, shit-stinking river. It had caused a cholera outbreak in the Victorian era. Now, people were drinking from it. It needed boiling. But how could they boil it? No gas, no electricity, wood fire, at home, in flats. It would cause fires. A woman in Southwark, with 2 children, drank water she took from the river. Didn't boil it. Died 3 days later. Diarrhea, dehydration. Her children were left alone. A neighbor took them, maybe, or threw them onto the street. No one knows. The Serpentine in Hyde Park turned into a poison pit within a week. People came to get water, but that water was stagnant, green, full of algae. They drank it anyway. There was no choice. On the 14th day, a dysentery outbreak began. The hospitals were already full. Now, the corridors smelled of diarrhea and vomit. Doctors fled, nurses fled. Only the dying remained. Tribes. London's new map, the city divided. Not officially, but everyone knew. Each neighborhood began defending its own territory. In Camden, former pub owners came together, called themselves the Camden Coalition. They had no guns, but they had clubs, axes, knives. They set up barricades at entry points. "This is ours. You can't come in." In Hackney, a group of Kurdish and Turkish shopkeepers organized. They took over a shop warehouse, put it under protection. Everyone would contribute. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. Kensington and Chelsea, the rich neighborhood, set up the tightest defense line. Men from private security firms lined up at street corners with their weapons. When any stranger approached, they fired, didn't ask questions. In Tower Hamlets, the situation was different. There, gangs already existed. Now, they were kings. Young boys 15, 16, 17 years old roamed with knives, clubs studded with nails. They took tax from everyone they saw. Food, water, women, everything counted as tax. A man in Mile End, a former teacher, didn't pay his tax. "I won't give you shit," he said. The boys laughed, pulled out their knives, killed the man in the middle of the street, left the body there as a warning. No police, no army, Only the strong escape. The island is now a grave. On the 15th day, people began fleeing London. But where to? North. Scotland. Maybe it's different there. Maybe there's food there. They walked. Hundreds, thousands of people on the M1 motorway, heading north, carrying their belongings on their backs. Children crying, old people falling. No one looked back. After 50 kilometers, the first deaths began. Exhaustion, hunger, thirst. Bodies left by the roadside, not buried, just left. Those who reached Birmingham found closed doors. "We're not taking Londoners. You're bringing disease. Get out of here." Some resisted, tried to force their way in, were shot, killed. Some turned back to London. But London was already dead anyway. A group, maybe 30 to 40 people, decided to go to Dover. Let's go to the French, to Europe, maybe there. When they reached Dover, they saw the port, empty, silent, no ships. The Channel Tunnel was closed, doors locked. One man said, "Let's find a boat. We'll cross by sea." They found an old fishing boat. 12 people boarded. Too many, but everyone wanted to board. A fight broke out. 2 people died. Finally, the boat set off. The English Channel is not calm. Waves, currents. The boat got 3 kilometers out, then started taking on water. People screamed, "Let's turn back," but they didn't turn back. The boat sank. 12 people drowned. Their bodies washed up on Dover Beach a few days later. Gulls ate them. Rural, poor heaven, rich hell. While London collapsed, the countryside. Was it different? In a small village in Yorkshire, I forget the name, maybe near Skipton, people gathered. Farmers, landowners. "We'll manage," they said. And they really did. Because they had land. Wheat, barley, vegetables. They had goats, sheep, dairies. But the problem was, everyone knew this. Those fleeing the cities came to the villages. "Help us. We're starving." At first, the villagers helped. They shared. Then the numbers grew. 50, 100, 500 people, all hungry, all desperate. And the village had food for 30 people. The villagers pulled out their weapons, hunting rifles. "Leave here. We have nothing to give you." The city people attacked. Saws, axes, stones, with everything. The hunting rifles fired. 10 to 15 city people died, but 5 villagers died too. In the end, the city people fled, but they returned at night. This time with more numbers. They burned the village, damaged the fields, stole the animals. Everyone lost. Final broadcast. The BBC's farewell. On the 21st day, the BBC's final broadcast was made. The last drop of generator fuel was used. The newsreader, an old man, he'd worked at the BBC for 40 years, looked at the camera. His eyes were full. This is probably our last broadcast. Electricity, fuel, our resources have run out. The Kingdom of England, the United Kingdom. This island is experiencing the darkest period in its history. The government isn't functioning. Our army has dispersed. There is no law on the streets. But please remember, we survived. We survived plagues, wars, bombs. Maybe this time too. His voice broke. He cried. The camera shook. God save the Queen. God save this island. The screen went dark. Never came back on. New world. Alone in the dark. A month later, London was a ghost city. Very few people walked the streets. Most moved at night. They hid during the day, because daytime was gang time. Buildings were dark. In some windows, candles burned. But few, because attracting attention meant death. The lions in Trafalgar Square were still there. The statues still stood, but there were no people in the square. Only corpses, No one removed them. It was normal now. The gates of Buckingham Palace were closed. No one knew what was inside. Rumor said the royal family had fled or died. Didn't matter. On the streets, sometimes a group of people could be seen, moving together, safety. But most of the time, those groups were clashing too. For food, for water, for a blanket. The Thames still flowed. Dirty, shit-stinking, full of the dead. But it flowed. And the bridges, London Bridge, Tower Bridge, Westminster Bridge, were still standing, empty. Only the wind passed over them. A man who he was, where he came from, not clear, stood in the middle of the bridge, looked at the river, at the opposite bank, at the dark city. An island, he said to himself. His voice was hoarse. A cursed island. He jumped. The water was cold, but he was already dead. Just hadn't fallen yet. Epilogue. Silence. 60 days later, a French reconnaissance plane passed over England. The pilots looked down. London was dark. No lights, no smoke. There might be no one left, the pilot said. Or everyone's hiding, said his co-pilot. The plane turned back. France was struggling with its own problems too. There was no one to save England. When winter came, the island froze. Literally, without heating, people froze to death. In homes, on streets, in the tube, London turned into a grave. The grave of 9 million people. And the United Kingdom? That concept remained in history books, because an island, when no ships arrive from outside, is nothing but a prison. And in this prison, everyone had been condemned. Final words. People think civilization is solid. Buildings, laws, armies. These seem strong, but the truth is, civilization is so fragile that the absence of one thing brings down everything. Oil, water, electricity, food. When one of these goes, the rest follow, and only darkness remains. On London's streets, the wind still blows, between the empty cars, over the broken glass, and sometimes, from very far away, a scream is heard, but no one runs, because no one cares anymore. The island has fallen silent, and silence may be the worst ending.